The general's aide rushed through the sterile corridors of Walter Reed Medical Center, clutching classified documents that could change the course of military medicine forever. His mission was simple, yet unprecedented. Find Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos and convince her to abandon everything she'd worked for. But there was one problem nobody had anticipated. Maria Santos didn't exist anymore, at least not officially. What happened next would expose a cover-up that reached the highest levels of military command and reveal why the Pentagon's most decorated combat surgeon had vanished without a trace. If you want to discover how one woman's refusal to stay silent brought down an entire network of corruption, make sure you subscribe because what you're about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about military medicine. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know, because this story begins 3 months earlier in a small county hospital in rural Montana, where nobody knew that the quiet night shift supervisor was once the most feared and respected surgeon in the entire armed forces. The emergency department of Mercy General Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos that Maria Santos had grown accustomed to over the past 18 months. She moved between patients with the efficient grace that marked her every action, checking vitals, administering medications, ensuring that the skeleton crew of the night shift could handle whatever walked through those doors. To everyone around her, she was simply Maria, the nurse supervisor who never seemed rattled, never lost her cool, and somehow always knew exactly what to do when things went wrong. But Maria Santos was carrying a secret that weighed heavier than the stethoscope around her neck. She wasn't just any nurse. She was Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, former chief of combat surgery for the Army's most elite medical units. She had performed over 800 surgeries in active war zones, saved countless lives under impossible conditions, and earned more commendations for surgical excellence than any other military physician in recent history. Tonight felt different, though. The air carried a tension that reminded her of those final days in Afghanistan, when everything started to unravel, and she realized that the enemy wasn't just on the other side of the wire. Sometimes the most dangerous threats came from within your own ranks. Dr. Peterson emerged from Trauma Bay 2, his scrubs stained with blood and his expression grim. Maria recognized the look immediately. She'd worn it herself, too many times to count. The look of a surgeon who'd just lost a patient they should have been able to save. 23-year-old construction worker, Peterson said, quietly as he approached the nurse's station. Fell from scaffolding, massive internal bleeding. I did everything I could, but the damage was too extensive. His family is in the waiting room. Maria nodded, her mind automatically cataloging the details: height of fall, impact pattern, likely organ damage. Even now, 18 months after she'd walked away from surgery forever, her brain still processed trauma cases like a combat surgeon. She couldn't turn the approaches off, couldn't stop seeing she might have taken, the techniques that might have made the difference. I'll handle the family notification, she said softly. Peterson looked grateful. He was a good doctor, competent and caring, but he'd been trained in civilian medicine where you had time to think, time to plan, time to bring in specialists. He'd never learned to work with the brutal efficiency that kept people alive when seconds mattered more than protocol. As Maria walked toward the waiting room, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The words on the screen made her blood run cold. Colonel Santos, we need to talk. General Morrison requires your immediate assistance. Lives depend on it. Reply if you're willing to listen. Maria stared at the message, her hands trembling slightly. Morrison. She knew that dear General Patricia Signe Morrison, current medical command. The woman who a director of Army, the name. Briga orders that end career and sent her into this Maria's military-imposed exile. She self to learn that their son and toward the waiting room where Delete A family was about, continued the message without responding. Brother, husband wasn't that would shatter their world. Maria News couldn't to deliver home, but shake the feeling that her, as she prepared coming to her. The waiting room was dim, constructed. New life was about to crumble around carefully that seemed designed to make difficultly lit, filled with the kind of uncomfortable furniture and family had the workers stilled together harder. Maria found conversations even the corner. His construction wife, barely old enough to be anyone, held a sleeping's widow toddler. His parents sat beside them, their faces already showing the terrible knowledge that comes when medical staff approach with that particular expression. Maria sat across from them, her voice gentle but clear as she explained what had happened. She'd delivered this kind of news hundreds of times, first as a military surgeon and now as a civilian nurse, but it never got easier. The only thing that changed was her ability to disconnect from the emotional weight of it all. As the family processed their grief, Maria's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text message. It was a phone call from a number she recognized immediately. Her hands went numb as she stared at the screen, knowing that answering would drag her back into a world she'd fought so hard to escape. She let it go to voicemail, but the phone rang again immediately, and again. Whoever was calling wasn't going to give up easily. Finally, Maria stepped into an empty conference room and answered. Colonel Santos. The voice on the other end was crisp, official, carrying the weight of military authority. This is Major Williams from General Morrison's office. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. I'm not Colonel Santos anymore, Maria replied quietly. I'm a civilian nurse, and whatever situation you're dealing with, you'll need to find someone else to handle it. Ma'am, with all due respect, you're the only person who can help us. We have a medical crisis that's beyond the capabilities of our current surgical staff. American lives are at stake, and General Morrison specifically requested you. Maria closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of command responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She'd walked away from this world for good reasons. The kind of reasons that kept her awake at night and made her question everything she'd ever believed about honor, duty, and service to country. I'd help you, she but before Ken said finally. Find someone else. She could hang up. Major Williams said something that made her freeze. Ma'am, it's about Operation Nightfall, the mission that got you discharged. We know what really happened over there, and we know you were set up. General Morrison has evidence that proves your innocence, but she needs your help to expose the people responsible. Maria felt the world tilt around her. Operation Nightfall, the mission that had destroyed her career, her reputation, and nearly her sanity, the mission where everything went wrong and she'd been blamed for deaths that weren't her fault. For 18 months, she'd carried the guilt and shame of that failure, believing that she'd somehow let down her country and the ended on her. What soldiers who dep kind of evidence, she whispered, the kind that shows you were deliberately sabotaged by people who saw your success as a threat to their own advancement, the kind that proves those soldiers died because someone wanted to destroy your career, not because you made any mistakes. Maria leaned against the conference room wall, her legs suddenly unsteady. If what Major Williams was saying was true, then everything she'd believed about that night, everything that had driven her into exile, was a lie. General Morrison will be arriving at your location within the hour, Major Williams continued. She's bringing the files with her. All we're asking is that you look at the evidence. After that, the choice is yours. Maria hung up the phone and stared at her reflection in the conference room window. 18 months of carefully constructed peace was about to shatter, and there wasn't anything she could do to stop it. She'd built this new life brick by brick, convincing herself that Maria Santos the nurse was enough, that she didn't need the weight of command or the burden of impossible decisions. But Operation Nightfall had never really left her. It lived in her dreams, in the way she automatically calculated trauma responses, in the muscle memory that kicked in whenever she heard the sound of helicopter rotors. She'd tried to bury Lieutenant Colonel Santos, but you can't bury who you really are forever. The emergency department felt different when she returned to her rounds. Every face looked like a potential threat. Every shadow seemed to hide secrets she wasn't ready to confront. Maria moved through her remaining patients with mechanical precision, her mind racing through possibilities she'd spent over a year trying to forget. Dr. Peterson found her in the supply closet, methodically organizing inventory that was already perfectly arranged. "Maria, you've been reorganizing those same shelves for 20 minutes. Everything okay?" She looked up, realizing she'd been moving the same boxes in circles without really seeing them. "Just thinking about some things from the past," she said quietly. "Sometimes it catches up with you whether you want it to or not." Before Peterson could respond, the automatic doors of the emergency entrance whooshed open with unusual urgency. Two figures in military dress uniforms strode through the doors, their bearing unmistakably command level. The taller woman, her silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun, swept the room with eyes that missed nothing. Brigadier General Patricia Morrison looked exactly as Maria remembered her: intimidating, brilliant, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her people. The general's gaze found Maria immediately, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. 18 months of exile, of carefully maintained anonymity, evaporated in an instant. Morrison approached the nurse's station with the measured stride of someone accustomed to having rooms full of people snap to attention when she entered. "Nurse Santos," General Morrison said, her voice carrying across the emergency department, "I believe we have some things to discuss." Every head in the department turned. Dr. Peterson looked confused. The other nurses exchanged glances, and Maria felt the careful walls she'd built around her new identity crumbling in real time. There was no pretending anymore, no hiding behind scrubs and clipboard routines. The military had found her, and with it came everything she'd tried to leave behind. "General," Maria said quietly, "I'm on duty. Whatever you need to discuss can wait until my shift ends." Morrison smiled, but at a pleasant it wasn't expression. "I'm afraid it can't wait, Colonel. We have a situation developing that requires your immediate attention. American soldiers are dying, and you're the only surgeon with the specific experience we need." Maria felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on her shoulders, like an old uniform she'd never quite learned to take off. Around them, the emergency department had gone quiet. Dr. Peterson stepped closer, his expression concerned and protective. "I'm sorry, General," Peterson said, his voice steady despite the obvious intimidation factor, "but Maria is a valued member of our staff, and she's currently responsible for patient care. Whatever you need to discuss will have to wait." Morrison's attention shifted to Peterson with the kind of focus that had made colonels nervous throughout her career. "Dr. Peterson, is it? You seem to be under the impression that this is a request rather than a matter of national security." The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. Maria could see her carefully constructed civilian life colliding head-on with the military world she'd tried to escape. Every person in that emergency department was about to learn exactly who she really was, and there was no way to stop it from happening. "General Morrison," Maria said, stepping between Peterson and the general, "if you want to talk, we can talk. But not here, and not in front of my colleagues." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Smart choice, Colonel. There's a conference room down the hall where we can have some privacy." Her aide, a young major with nervous energy, gestured toward the hallway they'd scouted when they arrived. As Maria walked toward the conference room, she could feel every eye in the department following her. Dr. Peterson called after her, Maria, you don't have to go anywhere with them. If you need support, we're here for you. She turned back, seeing genuine concern in his face, and knowing that after tonight, everything would be different. Whatever General Morrison was about to show her, whatever crisis required her specific skills, would either vindicate her or destroy what little peace she'd managed to find. "Thank you, David," she said quietly, "but this is something I have to handle alone." The conference room felt smaller, with General Morrison's presence filling it. The aide set up a laptop and began pulling files from a secured briefcase, while Morrison studied Maria with the intensity of a commander evaluating assets before a critical mission. "Santos, Morrison." Colonel began, then caught herself. "I know you prefer civilian titles now, but what I'm about to show you requires us to speak as military officers. What happened during Operation Nightfall was not your failure. It was a carefully orchestrated sabotage designed to remove you from a position where you were becoming inconveniently effective." Maria sat down heavily, her hands folded to hide their trembling. For 18 months, she'd replayed that night over and over, analyzing every decision, every cut, every moment, when she might have done something different to save those soldiers who died on her table. The aide opened the laptop and turned it toward Maria. On the screen were classified documents, communication logs, and medical records she'd never seen before. Evidence that someone had deliberately compromised her surgical supplies, altered her briefings, and set her up to fail in the most spectacular way possible. "My God," Maria whispered, scanning the documents. They knew. They knew the intelligence was wrong. They knew the surgical equipment was faulty, and they sent my team anyway. Morrison leaned forward. "The question now, Colonel, is what you're willing to do about it. Because the same people who destroyed your career are about to get more soldiers killed, and you're the only person with both the surgical skills and the inside knowledge to stop them." The files spread across the conference table painted a picture of corruption so deep and systematic that Maria felt her stomach turn. Communication intercepts, altered medical requisitions, deliberately falsified intelligence reports, everything that had gone wrong during Operation Nightfall had been orchestrated by people she'd trusted with her life and the lives of her patients. Morrison pulled out a photograph and placed it in front of Maria. 3 soldiers in dress uniforms, their faces young and serious. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Corporal Jenkins, and Private First Class Chen. The men who died on her operating table that night while she fought desperately to save them with equipment that had been sabotaged and intelligence that had been deliberately falsified. "These men didn't die because you failed them," Morrison said quietly. "They died because Colonel Marcus Webb and his supporters in Army Medical Command needed a scapegoat. You were too good, too decorated, too visible. A female surgeon outperforming everyone else was threatening their carefully constructed power structure." Maria stared at the faces of the soldiers she'd been unable to save. For 18 months, she'd carried their deaths like stones in her chest, believing that somehow she should have done better, worked faster, been more skilled. The guilt had driven her from surgery forever, convinced that she wasn't worthy of holding lives in her hands. Maria looked up from the photographs, her eyes meeting Morrison's steady gaze. The truth had finally surfaced, exposing a conspiracy that cost 3 good soldiers their lives and destroyed her career in the process. But now she faced an impossible choice: return to the world that had betrayed her to save lives that might otherwise be lost, or walk away from the corruption that had already taken too much from her. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought on foreign soil, but in the corridors of power where honor and politics collide, and where one person's courage to stand up can change everything.